Okay, welcome yet again. We are now streaming live on YouTube. So, hello to everybody on YouTube. I cannot see, of course, any comments over there, but it's nice to see people are from far and away. Canada. Okay, welcome yet again. We are now streaming live on YouTube. So, hello to everybody on. Okay, technical difficulties. Had to close YouTube there. I think it's still streaming there. Margot usually does that, so excuse my technological ignorance here. I'm Marin, for those of you that don't know, and there's a lot of people here that I don't feel like I know or have seen. And I'm one of the founders of Indie Birth. Margot is the other founder, and she is not here today. So I will be just kind of leading a informal chat discussion around making powerful choices in our pregnancies. So hopefully you've come with questions and things that you want to talk about. And I'm just going to kind of blab after we get settled in. I always love to pick a card for our group and just take a couple of minutes for each of us to come into our bodies and our space. Virtual meetings are so weird, right? I mean, they're cool. It's cool that we can all be here from, Ireland to Canada and back around, but I think they can feel really disconnected. And I always like to do my best to have it feel like we're all sitting together. Imagine sitting in a circle. So if you're able, I know it's a Saturday here and you might have kids around. If you're able to just take a couple of minutes, shut your door, get a minute of quiet, and just attune to your own body, your own surroundings before we come together. So if it feels good, you can close your eyes. You don't have to. If you're in a really comforting room, if you have a pretty view out the window like I do, you can just focus in on something that feels really good, that reminds you or is really comforting. And just breathing in whatever way you would like to kind of find your own breath in your own body. Just come into your own body. This might be the first time today that you've even done this. Maybe your feet are on the ground. I can hear the sound of rain lightly outside. And just notice what you're feeling inside of your own self. Maybe you're feeling a lot of different energies or pulls. Maybe you're hearing lots of sounds. Maybe you're just feeling quiet and still. And just feel what you feel. There's no wrong or right. You can come back to yourself later, of course, and maybe pay more attention to places that feel constricted. And opening your eyes if you had them closed and kind of glancing around your room. Again, noticing what might ground you here in this moment. It's so easy to forget we're just now. We're right now here. And looking at the other faces. I don't see a ton of cameras on, but that's okay. If you can't, you can't. If you can, I'd love to see your face. Looking at the faces I do see and making those connections just eye to eye in the ways we can. And again, feeling like we're all together in a circle somewhere. I don't know where, maybe in some yurt somewhere, all sitting in sisterhood to talk about this idea of powerful choices and how we make them and whatever else comes up today. I will pull a card for us. And it's from this fun new deck I got from my friend Nicole, who I don't think is here today, but it's a dog tarot, the magical dogs. And I am a dog weirdo. I have a million dogs. So it was the perfect gift for me. And I'm really enjoying learning this deck. It's really, really sweet. So I'll just pick one card for the meeting. You take it if it resonates, you leave it if it doesn't. I don't care at all. It is the new moon in Taurus, which is really grounded. It's a great time to feel more stable than we've probably felt. I don't know about you, but the last month has not been stable. There's been the eclipses and, the Mercury was in retrograde. And so we're just coming in now to what feels like really solid energy, which I think feels so good. And I'm finally starting to just think ahead and in a positive way about what's next. So you may or may not be feeling that way. Ooh, it's the Tower. So anybody that knows tarot, the Tower is the Tower. This just happens to be the dog version. And you can see there's 3 dogs and they're kind of like scrambling. And there's a fire and lightning. It's a very dramatic card. I can read from the book, but usually the Tower symbolizes what you would think, kind of like something crashing down to make way for the new, which is totally how I'm feeling. Things have crashed and now it's time. So let's see just what the book says briefly. This is a really simple book, which I kind of like. And we've got to get to the major arcana here. Okay. So it's definitely about sudden change, sometimes shock and upheaval, high drama, being in survival mode, but then revolution, release, and change. So literally, Tower is crashing, keeping your head about you, using your resources, and remembering your survival instinct. And when it blows over, which it will, of course, you'll be a wise survivor, able to embrace new life coming up out of the ashes of chaos. So that doesn't sum up the last month and this new moon. I don't know what does. Thank you to this tarot deck. Magical dogs again. I don't know where she got this, but it's super, super sweet. And yeah, gratitude for that card. And if it, like I said, if it means anything to you, cool. If it doesn't, that's fine. All right. So we are talking today about choice making. And if you are already having thoughts come up that you want to hear me address, you can type them into the chat at any time. And I will do my best to keep an eye on that and also go back and look at it. So maybe just tune in again to yourself and think about this topic. It's huge. I mean, I don't know what any of us had in mind exactly when we picked this. There's a million ways it could go. So think about why you're here today. Maybe you're pregnant. Maybe you're a doula. I don't know. There has got to be an angle that would be super helpful to you to hear about today. So I would love to hear that, and just go ahead and type in the chat. Again, I don't know where everybody's coming from, so I'm just gonna say my piece as I usually do. But if we're going to talk about choices, there's all kinds of powerful ways to do that. And of course, there's all kinds of ways that aren't powerful to do that. There's all kinds of ways that women in pregnancy are regularly giving away their power without even realizing it. So that's where this could go a million different ways. I would love to start with these concepts, and I think lived truths, not just concepts, lived truths of autonomy and sovereignty and self-responsibility. So those are huge. And if you're wondering what any of those mean, let's see. In the case of birth, the definition of an indie birth, and this is from many, many years ago when Margot and I came up with the definition, it was essentially birth decisions made in alignment with your own individual truth, sovereign and free. So maybe you were wondering what an indie birth is or where we came up with that. It doesn't mean a home birth. It doesn't mean a free birth. It means a woman who has made choices in alignment with her own truth. And that is being sovereign. That is freedom. That is freedom. So if we start with that, in that conversation, it's less about the actual choice. The choice is just like a symptom of the alignment that a woman, a person has in their life, right? Does that make sense? A choice is not just something we can make as if, we're ordering something at dinner. That's a choice, right? But in birth, hopefully we're not making choices like that. We have to first start with what we believe to be true, what we believe about birth to be true, what we believe about ourselves to be true, and go from there. So I believe birth is a rite of passage. I believe it is a sacred ceremony. I don't believe it's anything that we need to ask permission for. And I believe that we inherently know how to do it and what choices to make. And of course, every woman is different. Every woman with each of her pregnancies is different. And so again, the choices might look different. But from my perspective, and the way I also work with women as a midwife, is that they are free to make their choices. They are autonomous, and hopefully they want to be autonomous, right? That's a whole other discussion. If you are seeking a midwife or any kind of person to work with, you want to make sure that they are in alignment with wherever you fall on this scale of autonomy. So autonomy being how in charge of yourself do you want to be? And again, there's not a right or wrong answer, but you have to be honest with yourself. So even if you're a doula, you're working with women, you need to figure out as a doula, what's important to you. Would you rather work with women that are fully autonomous in their pregnancies? Or are you okay working with women that aren't, women that are okay with someone else making choices for them? So there's a wide spectrum there. And of course, we're here, Indie Birth is here. We're doing work as midwives to support full autonomy, to support full choice making, which some people really, truly do not understand, even other midwives, other care providers. There's this belief that if you're a midwife, you're above the woman. You must know more than her. How could she know how to make a choice? You've had experience, you must know better. And so, it starts really getting complicated. But in my mind, in my work, in my heart, all women know what they need and what's good for them. And often support is a really great way of pulling that out. So a woman that feels unsupported might not even know she has autonomy, and she might not be able to access that because it might seem really scary and big to make all these choices, right? But then we get into self-responsibility. At the end of the day, at the end of the birth, who's responsible for the choices that were made? And that's very relevant lately in my own life, in some of my work with my own clients, right? Women are granted full autonomy by themselves, by the midwives they work with, perhaps, but then they have to take full responsibility for their choices. No matter what happens, it's our choice. So those are some threads I'm thinking about. I know that that's a lot there. I'm going to read the comments. And if you have more or questions or a way you're hoping this will go, let me know, because it's a very big topic. I see lots of first pregnancies, which is really exciting. And probably is most relevant to those of you that are having your first baby or your first baby at home. It could look either way. Okay, I'll kind of answer like Anna Grace. I see your comment and we'll kind of get to them. In my first pregnancy, just to share some stories, I have 10 children, if you didn't know, and my oldest daughter will be 21 in about 6 months. So honestly, I have lived on this spectrum myself, from no autonomy, basically, to obviously trying my best to live a fully autonomous life. So if I can do it, you can do it. It took me 20 years. Maybe it'll take you less. But the idea is not that we always walk in with our first pregnancy into full awareness of these issues. We're not culturally supported or taught most of what I've shared already. We're not taught about being aligned with ourselves, right? We're not taught about connecting with our ancestors or the elders to teach us and show us how to go through a rite of passage. There's so many pieces missing in our culture. So for a first pregnancy, I'll share mine. I had no idea about anything except that I wanted a natural birth. And I'm grateful for that. It was a little thing. My mom had always told me the story of my own birth, which I won't tell you right now, but she didn't have any pain medication. So I was born vaginally. And my whole life, my mom told me that it was a great experience, that it wasn't painful for her. So I'm super grateful for that. I knew going in with my first baby, that was my goal and that I could do it. And I wasn't really scared. But I had no idea about self-responsibility. I had no idea about autonomy or sovereignty. I just went to my OB appointments because that's what people do. That's what we're told to do. And I was a good girl, and that's what I did. And I did all the tests and I never asked questions. And, that's how most women seem to go about it. And it wasn't until my second birth, my first home birth, that I was able to even know what I didn't know. And again, that's part of the conundrum, especially with a first baby, which is why I'm so glad so many of you are here. So many of you are in our 13 moons. You're getting a head start. And maybe you're not pregnant yet. And that's even more of a head start because I had no idea about any of these things. So I thought there are just tests you do. The doctor tells you what to do. He knows best because he knows pregnancy better than me. He knows what health is. And that, of course, is not my belief anymore. I see that is the belief system for so many still on this planet, but things really are changing. So I'm glad about that. And of course, through the rest of my pregnancies, as you can imagine, I took full responsibility slowly. I mean, the first couple home births were with midwives, and it doesn't mean you can't or won't take self-responsibility because you hire someone. Honestly, you do no matter what. So even if you do choose an OB, even if you are in the hospital, even if you think they're responsible, guess what? They're really not, because it's your baby and your birth. And at the end of it, you have to hold all the pieces no matter what they are. So it's a really false belief to think you can give responsibility to someone else. You can give someone decision-making power, but you can't actually transfer the responsibility if this is your baby. You can't. So it's a false set of beliefs that this culture has erected to, create that victim consciousness. That you're supposed to save me. If I do what you say, everything will be fine. You're responsible for my birth. You're responsible for my baby living. These are the beliefs, right? Even if we're not hearing them that succinctly out in the universe, That's what most people are carrying. Birth is dangerous. Someone else is responsible. And we're just like pawns in the system that hopefully make it out okay. So it's night and day from saying, I own this experience. I will own it. I do own it. And I get what I get, right? Just because we make a choice in full consciousness and full awareness, and we'll talk more about choice making, doesn't mean we get to say how it looks. That's not what we're talking about. Oh, Evan, I've been thinking about you. So happy birthing. That's exciting. Okay, so I'll skip around kind of like I said. I see Paige's question and I'll read it for the people on YouTube that can't see. Do you talk with clients about that? And I'm assuming you mean self-responsibility. Or is that something they have to figure out for themselves, like in their own time? In general, this is something people have to figure out on their own time. All of us do. It's not any of our jobs to push someone faster on the path of sovereignty, freedom, autonomy than they can go. We're not supposed to do that for anyone. That's not our job. So every soul has where they are in this lifetime. However, if someone comes to me and, through a screening process and conversations and all of that, we decide to work together as a midwife and a pregnant woman, then most of the time it's a pretty good match. And that woman is already on this page and perhaps wants to be challenged a little bit, knowing full well that I am not the responsible party. I am not the decision maker in this relationship. So I do have that in paperwork. I have many paragraphs in my informed choice document that talks about home birth very honestly. It's safer for women that feel safe and are healthy. Things happen, and I am not God, and I do not control those things. And by working with me or with any midwife, you don't relieve yourself of having to make choice. In fact, making a choice is more heavily weighed perhaps on your own shoulders, because I will not do that for someone. I will not. It is not my choice to make. So what I will do is offer my experience, offer my stories, offer my professional and personal experience, offer whatever research or information that is out there. But it's not my choice to make, which again, not everybody understands. So, I've had women, many women along the way, along the years, that made a choice that I didn't quite understand or maybe had question about. And that's the beauty of a relationship. Hopefully you can express those things. And if I was truly uncomfortable with someone's choice, like if it truly was not aligned for me, then I would excuse myself from the situation. I wouldn't tell her she was making a bad choice or that something horrible was going to happen to her. I would just say, that's not in alignment for me. I'm not your midwife. There's got to be someone out there that's more aligned with you. And that is a whole other discussion. Not shaming women for their choices or making them think that they're making a wrong choice, because here's the truth. No one knows. That's the truth. No one knows. And you, in making your own choice, we don't always know. We're just making the choice because it feels good, hopefully, and we can talk more about that. Feels good. It feels aligned. And we go in that direction, still being open to whatever outcome, whatever possibility might arise from that choice. So, like I said, I can think of several examples. Let me think of some stories because those are good. So I can think of a woman I worked with a bunch of years ago, and I was pregnant at the same time. So there was going to be a gap in which I wasn't able to see her, right? Because I was having a baby and she was due, if I remember, I think like a month after me. So anyway, kind of leading up to me having a baby, she was also very pregnant. And, you know, we measure often the uterus with a tape measure. We learn that as midwives. And it can be here nor there, right? It can be accurate, it cannot be. There's lots of conversations to be had. But with this particular woman, a couple of prenatals in a row, she was measuring small. And I wouldn't hide that from someone. It is what it is. You know, I would say, and I did, what do you think about that? And she had questions. What could that mean? What could that not mean? Well, it could mean nothing. It could mean that your baby isn't growing as well as we'd hoped. It could mean your dates are off, right? It could mean a bunch of stuff. But at the end of it, I couldn't tell her exactly what it meant. I'm not God. So the choices are to investigate further or to not investigate further. And I remember her being very solid in her choice that nothing was wrong and she wasn't interested in any other testing. And, you know, this story is pretty typical. It either goes, you're measuring bigger, you're measuring smaller, right? It happens to people all the time. So it's not that interesting of a story, but I remember thinking, because it was her first pregnancy and she had had some challenges eating, that, you know, it could be her baby wasn't growing very well. Anyway, long story short, she didn't do any other testing and she had a perfectly normal sized baby about a month after I did. And I was there for it. And that was really great. But I remember how confident she was. And as a first time mom, that was really impressive. You know, sometimes we don't have that confidence the first time. Sometimes we don't have it the second or third time, but this mom had it and she knew that everything was fine. And it was my choice to trust her in that choice. Or I guess I could have said, hey, I'm not comfortable with that. You know, what do you want to do about it, kind of thing? Or maybe there's a better midwife for you. But again, that's not typical out in the world. Usually it's a pressure for a woman to do a certain thing. And it's often framed as choice in the medicalized system. But if you've ever been up against it, it doesn't feel like choice. It feels like pressure to do a thing. So I'll look for more questions or comments. Think about what's going through your head right now. Yeah, Paige. Paige is saying, no matter what happens, hopefully, if you made the choice yourself, you may be able to cope with the outcome easier. Yeah, ideally, I think it can look both ways, honestly. Yes, ideally, when we make the choice and we feel powerful in it, I think that's the key point. If we make the choice and we're kind of like, I don't know, I feel like I should do this, or like so-and-so feels like I should do this, the potential for trauma is there. And, you know, trauma doesn't come necessarily from the choice itself. Trauma comes from not feeling powerful or feeling like our power was taken. So I wish it worked that, you know, every choice every woman made, she felt great about and was totally able to cope with the outcome. And I don't think that's true. But it can be. My last birth, and many of you know the story, my last baby, my 10th baby, I had all home births, of course, except for the first one. And then my last baby, I decided to go to the hospital when I was pushing. And he was born really beautifully without any touching or intervention or even words. It was just like all my home births on the hospital table. And that was a choice I made. And, you know, I made it powerfully. No one influenced me. In fact, there wasn't anyone to really influence me or talk me out of it. And I felt great about that. And then, of course, had to go through kind of like a grieving process before I could come back to feeling powerful about it. So sometimes it ebbs and flows. And I can't see who's not muted, so I'm going to do my best here. Okay. So yeah, I guess I'm trying to say it's more complex sometimes than, oh, if I make the choice, I'll be fine with it. It's more complex than that. I think a lot goes into choice making. And if we make it out of fear, do we make a choice out of intuition? That's a huge piece of this conversation. But like I said, for me, ultimately, I feel and felt very powerful in that kind of after a process of doubting myself or, did I need to, and blah, 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 blah. So you still get that even when you make your own choice, I think, a lot of the time. Yeah, so many good comments. Some of them are a little long to read, so I'll try and like sum up some kind of response here. Well, working as a doula should be its own call someday, or, join our doula program. I know, Sammy, you're in it, so that's awesome. I would highly recommend, of course, our Doula Academy, and I'll post some links here when we're done. Full transparency, I have never worked as a doula. I never felt that call. So I had no experience in birth. And then I started a midwifery apprenticeship. So that's not always the most logical path. So just being honest, I've never worked as a doula because I knew I never could, in a sense. Since I had had my first baby in the hospital, I knew what it was like. I had lived it. And once I had a home birth, I couldn't imagine going back to the hospital to support women. So, not to say you shouldn't, not to say we don't need doulas in the hospital. I just knew for me, it wasn't the right choice. So, I don't have a lot of experience in that area other than when I've had to transport with midwifery clients to the hospital. And yes, it's frustrating. And yes, there's lots of pressure there. And I don't have any magical answers except that how we would behave in that situation under pressure is extreme, right? Like we might feel confident, we might feel that we made the right choices our way our whole pregnancy, and then bam, you wind up in a situation like that that feels totally different, and you don't feel respected and you don't feel heard. And that's a really challenging thing. I mean, for me, going into my last birth, I had the luxury of having 9 babies already. And I totally understand that, that's a huge part of why nobody said anything to me. I didn't have to make choices about, I don't want that. I don't want this. I don't want that. They knew I didn't want any of it. So they just minded their own business. And yeah, I get that's not typical, but I think it could be more typical in a sense, because being secure in your choices is something we're all working on, I'm sure, in our lives as well. It's not just focused on birth if you're talking about autonomy and sovereignty. So I'm going to make the choice that's best for me and my body and my baby and my family. And the work is holding on to that truth and not being influenced by people. So again, that's outside of birth. That's, your mother-in-law that thinks she knows better about what you need to do for your baby. That's your neighbor who tells you how to parent. Like the influences are everywhere that want to take us away from our own truth. And, we have to be in our truth to make a conscious choice. So all of those things weave together. If we're not feeling like secure and safe in ourselves, what's the choice from? The choice is from fear or trauma. So I know that's a lot too. But I guess to tie it back to the doula thing, maybe it's about working with women in a way that helps them find their voice rather than making it about like epidurals are bad and this is good and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, who are you? What do you want for this birth? What is your truth? And then, should she find herself in that situation, or you with her as her doula, it's a little easier to navigate because you know this woman, you know what she said she wanted, and you know why. It's not just something she checked off on a list. So it becomes a much deeper conversation, especially if you're working with women, to help them figure out what they really want. You can't make a choice unless you know what you really want. Otherwise, it's just like things are constantly coming at you and you're reacting. You're not responding, you're reacting to things coming your way. And if you're in a defensive mode, then again, you're not feeling safe, you're not feeling confident. The choice is going to be reactive. So let's see, good questions to ask a doula when looking for a match. Again, I would spend some time. So if you are pregnant, maybe a really easy exercise to do would be to journal, trying not to use your brain, just kind of like get in a quiet state, try to access your baby or your higher consciousness, whatever, and just write. What do you want? What do you want for a birth? What do you want? What do you want? What does it look like? What's important to you? And even that is such a great, simple exercise because, again, culturally, we have this medical focus on birth. We're taught birth is scary, it's a disaster. And so when we're coming from that system, we tend to focus on the negative. We tend to focus on what we don't want. And I hear this all the time. People come for interviews to work with me. And if they've had births before, especially, they can sit there for as long as you'll let them and tell you everything they don't want. And that's valuable. You do have to kind of know what you don't want, but there's a certain point at which you just become stuck in a wheel of negativity of the past. So thinking forward, what do you want? What does it feel like in your body? What does it look like? And then, if you were going to meet with a doula or a midwife, you could share that. This is what I want my birth to feel like. This is what I want my birth to look like. And you'll know it'll be a match or it won't. And perhaps they'll have questions back for you if they understand that to help you kind of refine what you're going for. Because there's nothing wrong with dreaming. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes, birth is unpredictable. Birth is beautiful. Birth is crazy. Birth can be messy. Birth can be the exact opposite of what you thought. All of those things are true. At the same time, you can dream. You can talk to your baby. You can envision the birth you want. There's no shame in that. And for women that really works for, that's also a place you can make choices from. And there's nothing wrong with that. We have such a bias in this culture, again, that intuition and connection is not accurate, that women are infants, that we can't make our own choices, that this gold standard of choice making is intellectual, right? How many websites are out there? How many groups even are there to tell you how to make this choice? How to make the choice to test for Group B strep. Well, you want to know? Go to 10 different websites that'll tell you your chance of your baby dying if you do or if you don't. And you have to decide, is that going to be how you make a choice? It doesn't mean information is bad, but we each have to decide if we make the choice from up here or in our bodies. And because we're growing a human during pregnancy, we have the opportunity to be in our bodies and channel that wisdom. So I'm definitely a little biased there. I think intellectual decision making in pregnancy is something we've been taught. I don't think it's inherent wisdom to the female body when birthing and growing a baby. I don't. And again, that doesn't mean it always works out perfectly. You could be totally connected to your body and your baby, and maybe you get the signal, the intuition, the message that something isn't right. So it doesn't mean it's always rainbows, but making a decision from up here in your head is challenging, especially when things don't work out. It feels like a really safe place, I think, for a lot of women to make a choice because they feel validated. They don't have that internal connection. They don't have great support from other women on the outside in their lives. And so it's really validating to, well, evidence-based birth says, who cares? You're not a study. You don't need evidence to make a choice, really. If you feel great about it, that's all that matters. I can think of a woman years ago who actually did our doula program recently, and I helped her with twins at home. And she had had a home birth before with another midwife. And when she got pregnant with the twins, the midwife said to her, "Can't help you. You're too old. You've had a cesarean in your past and you're having twins. Like, no, that's not a safe choice for you." And this woman disagreed. She said, "That's nice that you think that, but I conceive these babies naturally, and I know that they want to be born at home, and it's going to be great." And it was. But again, if she had, been maybe less experienced as a mom, those were her sixth and seventh babies. So, who knows if it had been her first pregnancy with twins. It's so easy to go down that rabbit hole of risk and, oh, you're not safe. And, all of these things that really don't leave room for a choice. If we're being honest, if we're being fully honest, many women feel like they don't actually have a choice. Excuse me. Stinny, I see your question about good questions to ask a recently unregistered midwife. I would say the same. So the same answer to the doula question. Not that we can't have questions for people. I think that's great. But sharing where you're coming from as a pregnant woman, to me as a midwife, would be more interesting. I mean, I'll answer anything, whatever. How many births have you attended? How many transports have you had? Like, they're the same questions all the time in that way. But I'm most interested and curious when I sit with someone, hearing what they have to say and hearing about them and hearing about their own birth and hearing about all the things that they want to share in a consult. And I love to ask women, what is your intention for this pregnancy? And sometimes people can't answer, and that's okay. What is your intention for this pregnancy? And I think not only is a great question, and I've heard some really beautiful answers, but it conveys this idea again that I'm not your creator of this experience. What is your intention? What are you going to create? And then it unfolds, right? What kind of support are you wanting? And you kind of go back and forth. Well, this is the kind of support I provide. Okay, well, that works for some people, doesn't work for other people. All right, we have some dog barking going on here, so you might hear it. Any other topics of interest along these lines? Anybody have anything that they want to hear more about in our last little bit? While you're thinking about it, I'm going to post just our standard Indie Birth links here for those of you that are new. We have a doula academy, we have a midwifery school, we have about 1 billion podcasts you can listen to for free. We have a childbirth education course called 13 Moons, which I did not put on here, and all kinds of other stuff. So you can save these links if you're new, maybe go check out the stuff later. We're on Instagram, of course, as Indie Birth, and let's see, I have an in-person retreat coming up in October in Hawaii. So anybody here that thinks they might want to become a midwife, maybe you're a doula, maybe you have no experience. No experience is fine. You do not need experience to come to this, because it's more of a soul searching kind of retreat where we get to sit together for 2 days and talk and feel into all the challenges to becoming a midwife. And if you attend the retreat and then end up enrolling in our Indie Birth Midwifery School, you'll get the money from the retreat back, if that makes sense. So if you know you're going to do our school at some point, the retreat is essentially free. And it's on Oahu, so who doesn't want to come hang out at the beach? It's going to be so fun. So that list, that link is in there. Yeah, it looks like they're not really clickable. I don't know what happened there. So just cut and paste them and go check it out later, maybe. Any more questions or thoughts? I'm not sure how audible the incessant barking is, so. I could talk a little bit more for just a couple of minutes about, ways to make choices, or, kind of like how you might walk through that. And if you have things to add, I'd love to hear them. Just type them in the chat. I guess it's really just a compilation of what we've already talked about, really. So let's say you have the choice to get a 20-week ultrasound. And again, let's not forget, that's a choice. So maybe you're someone that this is all new to, and you're like, oh, they do a 20-week ultrasound. No, they don't. You have to choose it. And that's how all of these things work. They don't do anything to you without your consent. So if you would like a 20-week ultrasound, the first thing I do when people bring that to the table with me, they might also assume, honestly, I have people all the time that are like, well, it's my first pregnancy, like I'm getting my ultrasound. And I say, okay, like, are you open to talking about that? Oh, okay, yeah. First question, what do you know about ultrasound, and why do you want one? And that's not meant to be confrontational. It's just a question. Why do you want one? And most people, even the ones I work with, look at me just like, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's to see that the baby's okay. They kind of ask a question with a question. So that's really curious to me. And again, not judgmental, just interesting. So you want to make sure everything's okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, who doesn't want to know everything is okay? However, what other ways of knowing do we have for that? So, connection with the baby, connection with our body, clinical signs. So typically a baby that's healthy will do healthy things in the womb, right? They'll grow, they'll move, that kind of stuff. So having these more complex conversations, and that's only one choice, right? We have how many in a normal pregnancy? I don't know, 10 to 12 to more. So 20-week ultrasound is just one, and that's a huge topic. So I'm not going to go into that more. There is a podcast out there that I did a long time ago on 20-week ultrasounds and the risks and benefits. And again, in my perspective, I'm not trying to talk someone out of a choice. I don't really care, but I don't think that most women have the full disclosure. And I don't have the full disclosure, but I have a more full disclosure than they probably have, right? So ultrasound can be harmful. We know that in studies, like the ultrasound technology creates heat, and cells, or however they do the testing, the cells will move away from the heat. We know that it's not really a comfortable procedure for the living being that's being ultrasounded. And then we have kind of like the spiritual, emotional, are we meant to see babies in the womb, and what are we looking to know? And sort of the science that is there. Ultrasound isn't 100% at all kinds of things that can pop up that are false, positive, false, negative, whatever. So, it takes us back to the initial question, which is, why do you want it? If it's to make sure it's not capable of that. So it doesn't mean you can't use it, doesn't mean it can't be a piece of whatever you're looking for. But if you're looking for certainty from this test, that's not real. And people don't talk about that because, I don't know, we're just in this monotonous way of providing prenatal care. And even a lot of midwives, I know, require an ultrasound. They don't want to work with someone unless they can see that this baby is okay. So it's not just women that believe this. It's across the board. We have these false ideas of testing and technology meaning something more than they mean. So again, at the end of the day, I don't care what someone chooses, but she is going to own that choice, whatever it is. And we also talk about, hey, if you do make the choice to do this, just understand that sometimes it unravels into more testing. And that's something that, in a medical office, they don't even have the time to explain to you, right? That if you do this one thing, 10 other things could unfold. They could. So are you ready for that? Like, do you want to get on this conveyor belt of choice making? And, again, for some women, the answer is yes. And for a lot of women, the answer is, oh, I didn't know that. And when I tune in, and this is them, of course, when I tune in to my baby, I feel like nothing is wrong. I don't feel like I need this. And that's, again, not something you can teach someone how to do. That's not something you can like sort of force someone into. If they say that, I have never not respected it because I truly trust that. So any other additional thoughts around that? It's a huge topic. So yeah, to reiterate, I guess with any choice, my question to someone would be, why do you want that? Or why do you not want that? Like, what's coming up for you? What have you heard? What did you read? How are you feeling? Who else is involved in this choice? I think that's a great question, right? There's usually a partner involved. And I hear that a lot with the ultrasound choice. A lot of women say, oh, I don't want it, but he wants it. It's like, okay, well, let's unravel that then, because there's so much trauma in the world, and partners, guys, they also hold a lot of trauma around birth, and that's a topic for another day. So a lot of men in particular, aren't doing this kind of stuff. They're not talking about birth, so they don't know. And they just heard that everyone gets an ultrasound. So anyway, it starts setting you up for taking you outside of yourself. I think if you make one of those choices in full consciousness, in full awareness of yourself, it usually feels great. And I've done it myself, so I can speak to that for sure. But when you don't, or you feel like someone else wanted it or convinced you, or you didn't really want to do it, then other thoughts and feelings start to seep in, and they take you away from yourself, which I think that's the biggest enemy of pregnancy, if there is one. It's just a woman outside of herself. Am I aware, is it possible to do a Doppler or scan outside of government grounds? Sure. Just find an ultrasound tech that, is willing to do it outside of the system. I've had many of them through the years. All right, I'm going to give you like 60 more seconds for any questions or thoughts here in the chat. I don't think I left out any links, but you can always email us at support@indiebirth.org if there's something you want to know that you haven't seen a link for. Social.indiebirth.org on that list is our free social network. So feel free to join that if you're new to all things indie birth. And if you end up taking a course or a program, you'll be there because that's where all that stuff is. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here with me. I imagine the circle being closed, enjoying your post new moon goodness, whatever that is for you, and a beautiful weekend. And I'll see you back here with Margot in about 2 weeks. I don't know what the topic is, but stay tuned. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Bye.